Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to Stockade Inn, Schenectady. Thank you. Thank you. Thanks to Mr. Jeff McDonald and the wonderful staff hosting today's lunch for us. To all, Fair Housing Month, thank you for your presence and your participation at this wonderful event. The purpose of this gathering is to celebrate the 47th year of the passage of the Fair Housing Act and a reminder that the Fair Housing Act passed in 1968 and it amended in 1986 and is still alive. We're delighted to have you here with us. You are truly caring people. You are here to help promote equal opportunities throughout the community, and I would like to ask you to bring a message to your organization's colleagues that Fair Housing Act is still alive and no one should discriminate against anyone based on race, color, religion, sex, national origin, disability, and familial status, and real estate marketing and related transactions. And to pass the message that fair housing means treating everyone equally when negotiating the sale, rental, financial, and advertising of a property. Under the New York State Fair Housing Act, race, creed, color, national origin, sex, age, disability, marital status, military status, family status, and sexual orientations are also covered. Federal and state law makes it illegal to treat individuals differently in all housing-related transactions. Private or public entities are required to follow federal, state, and local laws regarding fair housing. As you may know, during the President Lyndon B. Johnson in April 1968, Congress moved swiftly and passed the Fair Housing Act, considering that Reverend Martin Luther King Jr. had been assassinated just 1 week before. The act was in part of legislative testament to King's long-standing campaign against housing discrimination. Nationally, racial segregation remains pervasive reality. 47 years after the federal enactment, many of this country's major metropolitan areas remains highly segregated. This flies in the face of the ideal that Americans should have a choice about where to live and not to be confined or steered toward underserved areas or substandard neighborhoods. Housing costs are high, wages are low, and affordable housing are in short supply. Housing options are especially limited for lower income people. Renters pay at least half of their income on rent and utilities, and many are dependent on cars that cost them even more just to go back and forth to work or to the grocery store. This is not the reality envisioned by the farmers of the Fair Housing Act. The act is not about banning discrimination. It's about promoting integration as well. The key idea is that communities benefit when they are inclusive of all kinds of people. Schenectady Fair Housing Office is dedicated by providing information regarding investigation, education, conciliation, and referrals of housing discrimination complaints free of charge to individuals and entities in our service area. These guidance are provided to housing providers, tenants, homeowners, banks, financial lending institutions, and to the public in general. In today's event, we're going to recognize some outstanding individuals who are part of outstanding organizations and who are outstanding community members. They have helped families to own affordable homes for the first time. They have helped many achieve the American dream of home ownership. They helped provide habitable and safe place for families with young children and prevented wrongful evictions. They have guided many residents that they should possess a degree of security of tenure that guarantees protection against forced evictions, harassment, and other threats. They have sheltered homeless individuals during the cold and frigid weather and helped them to live in a way that's more humane. Without them and their caring organizations and the assistance they provide to our families and community otherwise would suffer a great deal. Kids, family, individuals would be on the streets. We thank our leaders for helping to promote and understand the hardship and the need of people, and the need of the individuals and families for safe shelter and help with the American dream. We also thank those of you that are struggling every day to help protect the rights of individuals under the Civil Rights Act. Quickly, I would like to summarize just a few barriers currently we are faced with and would like to ask for help to overcome these. They are as follows. 1, access to credit. This is a critical fair housing issue. With many credit-worthy Americans unable to secure a loan and be able to achieve their American dream, some may need help to be assisted with closing costs or down payment, and it is important to help those in need for small assistance to buy the house they need. 2, accessible housing. To better serve our disabled community members, we need more accessible units for renters and home buyers. Housing must be accessible to all. Disadvantaged and vulnerable groups must be given and provided full access to housing and the resources. Number 3, affordability in rental housing. Housing costs should be at such a level that the attainment and satisfaction of other basic needs are not threatened or compromised. For instance, one should not have to choose between paying rent or buying food. Number 4, safe and free from hazardous conditions housing for families with kids. In order to build a healthy future, we need safe housing for our kids. We must provide residents adequate space that protects them from cold, damp, heat, rain, wind, and other threats to health. Number 5, promoting cultural diversity, inclusive practices for new immigrants, LGBT, and the disabled community. Quick logistics. Lunch will start at 12:30. Washrooms are on your left as soon as you walk out of the door. And after food, you will have some great dessert provided by Stockade Inn. After that, the remaining time can be used for networking and exchange information. I would like to recognize Jackie Mancini, the Director of the Department of Development, who is with us for the first time at this luncheon. I would like to thank Linda Warner, who has helped me put this luncheon together and did all the necessary hard work. Please give a hand and applause to Linda Warner, Amy Hill, and Christine Pignani. At this time, I would like to ask our Honorable Mayor, Gary McCarthy, to present the Fair Housing Proclamation and enlighten us. Thank you.
Thank you, Ahmad. I want to thank everyone for coming out this afternoon. Recognize a couple of individuals here, my colleagues at City Hall, Councilmember Lisa Perazzo, Councilmember, where's Marion Porterfield? In the back, and our distinguished Council President, Peggy King. It's really a good group of people. We work together, and I appreciate everything that everyone in this room is doing in terms of improving housing, improving the opportunity for individuals to own a home, to improve their stature in life, and that it's appropriate where we pause once a year, we do this luncheon, and recognize that, again, there are still some people who choose not to play by the rules, and discrimination does exist. And we always have to be on guard for that and look for ways to make sure that we minimize that and make sure that it does not become part of this community. I want to also recognize Karen Johnson, who's a member of the Schenectady County Legislature. Karen. Did Tim Mattice come in from Troy? Tim, thank you. Tim's the City of Troy Director of Housing and Community Development. Lorraine Collins, who's representing New York State Commissioner Darrell Towns. Lorraine, thank you for coming over and just express to the Commissioner our thanks for the great job that he, you, and the other team members in Albany do with the DHCR, because we consider you a full partner in helping us improve housing and other issues within Schenectady. So again, I thank you and for coming over, and appreciate again the work that the Commissioner does. At this point, ask Jamie Ferraro to come up on behalf of Housing and Urban Development, and put on my glasses now to read this big proclamation. Whereas the Congress of the United States passed the Civil Rights Act of 1968, of which Title VIII declared that the law of the land would now guarantee the rights of equal housing opportunity. And whereas the laws of this nation and our state seek to ensure such equality of choice for all transactions involving housing. And whereas the City of Schenectady is committed to the mission and intent of Congress to provide fair and equal housing opportunities for all, regardless of race, color, national origin, religion, sex, disability, or familial status. And whereas ongoing education, outreach, and monitoring are key to raising the awareness of fair housing principles, practices, rights, and responsibilities. And whereas only through the continued cooperation, commitment, and support can barriers to fair housing be removed. Now therefore, I, Gary McCarthy, Mayor of the City of Schenectady, do hereby proclaim the month of April 2015 as Fair Housing Month in the City of Schenectady, and express the hope that this year's observance will further promote fair housing practices throughout the City of Schenectady. James, just want to pass that on to you, and appreciate again the work that you do.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor.
Now I have the opportunity to introduce Jamie as our principal speaker today. His words of wisdom, he's really a friend of Schenectady. He's made, you know, in the mayor's office and City Hall, you look at some of our relationships with other levels of government, and it's insulated. It's hard to deal with sometimes with people in Albany. It's hard sometimes to deal with people at the federal level. You know, Commissioner Towns has set a standard where it is an open door policy. It is a responsive level from DHCR. And Jamie, working with HUD, has made that a seamless relationship where when we have problems, where we need help, where we have ideas, he is there. He facilitates problem solving in our community. And so I'm just proud to call you a friend, and thank you for your time and effort on behalf of the City of Schenectady.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So glad to be here. I've got some prepared remarks because I'm also representing the FHEO office. Usually I like to just speak from the heart. But thank you all for allowing me to be here today, members of the City Council, Mr. Mayor, Lorraine, on behalf of the Commissioner. I want to echo the Mayor's words. I've worked in federal and state government for about 30 years now, and I've got to say I've got 25 counties and about 11 cities that I'm responsible for now in this job. Actually, the first thing I did in this job was come here and speak at Fair Housing Month luncheon 3 years ago, and 3 years on, here I am again as I approach the third year. And then prior to this, in the Department of Homeland Security, had New York, New Jersey, Puerto Rico, and the Virgin Islands. And it's not so much that I'm from here, been here since '86, and in Schenectady now for, oh gosh, 15, 16 years. So it's really my county, my city. I really think of it that way. But even among the great partners that I've been fortunate to have in my career, I feel really, truly fortunate to work with the City of Schenectady, Lorraine with Commissioner Towns, and he's really set a great example for how that partnership between municipalities and the state and the federal government should work. So it's been good for me as I sort of came into this job. So we're here to celebrate Fair Housing Month again. And so I want to just leave you with some examples that our 8,500 and something people at HUD, ministering to 360 million Americans across 50 states, some of the things that we come across, and I'll talk in a little more detail about some examples, but let me just give you a couple. A highly regarded institution, been in the community for well over 100 years, opposes a community development project that includes low and moderate income housing. Does it happen in this country? I don't know. Think about that a little bit. A realtor takes around a potential homeowner and sort of steers them towards a suburban setting because of those schools. All right, so let's think about those a little bit, and I'll come back to that after my prepared remarks. So America has experienced tremendous social progress since the Fair Housing Act was signed into law in 1968. We have greater access to jobs, education, and economic opportunities than before. You know, in the prepared remarks, it says minorities. I immigrated here from Colombia, South America as a child, and I'm happy to say that as I look at my 15-year-old and my 22-year-old, that they really look at the world so differently than even those of us that still consider ourselves young looked at it. And really, though there is tremendous issues in our country still with segregation and with the racial divides that we have, by and large, this next generation of young people make it so that instead of saying minorities have great access to jobs, education, and economic opportunities, we can say Americans have greater access to jobs, education, and economic opportunity than before. But despite how far we've come as a nation, unlawful discrimination continues to limit the options of some when it comes to one of life's most fundamental needs, which is housing. And when access to housing is limited, we all know that it makes it even harder for someone to access jobs, to access education and economic opportunities. Last fiscal year, HUD and its Fair Housing Assistance Program partner agencies received 8,648 complaints alleging discrimination based on one of the Fair Housing Act's 7 prohibited bases. As Ahmad said, race, color, national origin, religion, gender, family status, and disability. And our department has gone beyond that in rulemaking and really taking a look at sexual orientation. Again, back to my kids, but I've fashioned so much of my perspective on life now. It's hard for people that grew up in our generation to look and sometimes say that someone's a different lifestyle, who they are, who they see themselves as, to make that something that we can put our arms around. But when you think about the 40% of the children in this country that are homeless identify as either lesbian, gay, bisexual, or transgendered people, these are kids, right? And so I'm heartened to see that my own children and their friends and their peers don't have the issues that we do with people's lifestyles and how they self-identify. Certainly our Secretary Castro, and the force of our department as it relates to fair housing has taken significant efforts to go beyond and to interpret it in rulemaking to bring the authority of the Fair Housing Act to that part of our country, and sort of the shame that these children not only have to have problems in having their own families accept them, but then when they go to try and find housing, have that door shut in front of their face as well. So HUD's Office of Fair Housing and Equal Opportunity is working hard to combat unlawful housing discrimination, and through an array of enforcement activities, fair housing policy initiatives, and education and outreach efforts, FHEO is taking appropriate actions against individuals and housing providers that discriminate. We're implementing guidance and rules that help further fair housing and educate the public about their housing rights and what to do if they believe those rights have been violated. In particular, the department has had great success in combating the various forms of discrimination faced by women across the nation. It's not just a thing of how much you earn or what the color of your skin is. Women are still facing significant barriers in obtaining equal housing. addressing lending discrimination, protecting the rights of persons with disabilities, implementing initiatives that address race discrimination, and putting new emphasis on the programs that increase job opportunities for low-income individuals and public housing residents, and contracts for the businesses that hire them. So 47 years after the Fair Housing Act was passed, the work being done by HUD is not only still relevant, it is helping to create better and stronger communities of opportunity where everyone has equal access to pursue their aspirations. So here we are in 2015. The 2015 Fair Housing Month theme is Fair Housing, It's Your Right, So Use It, which reflects FHEO's renewed commitment to educating the public about their fair housing rights and emphasizes how important it is that every person take action whenever they believe their housing rights have been violated. So do we believe that 6,400 instances are among 360 million people are the only instances of fair housing discrimination that have occurred in the last year? I don't. You can do the math. The theme is also a call to HUD staff, stakeholders, and partners to remain vigilant in addressing the blatant and subtle forms of housing discrimination that persist today. So our department's got a lot of silos, right? We're doing community development. We have funding and significant programs that we pay attention to the very, very important work of public housing in this country. We've got a multifamily housing operation that looks at the imbalance between home ownership and rental units at a fair market rate, rental units for low, moderate income people, for the elderly, and certainly for the disabled. So we spend a lot of time on that. But as well, we have this little part called enforcement, and our ears are efficient and our reach is long with regard to the enforcement piece. And it's not one that traditionally has been particularly highlighted within the department, but in the last two secretaries' terms it has been, and under Secretary Castro's term it certainly will be. In its enforcement activities, FHEO has emphasized the investigation of cases that have had broad, significant impact and sought relief for all those who have been harmed by discriminatory practices. And while many of these complaints start out as a single complaint filed by one person that is alleging that they've been harmed by a discriminatory practice, very frequently the evidence leads FHEO to expand the investigation to obtain relief for others harmed by the same practice. In fiscal year 2014, for example, disability was the most common basis of complaints filed with HUD, being cited as a basis for 4,606 complaints, or 54% of the overall total. Disability. Race was the second and most common basis of complaints, being cited as a basis for 2,374 complaints, or 28% of the overall total. And I'm just going to skip over a number of these that Ahmad already called, but we're covered. We're spending a lot of time, obviously, in taking a look at what's going on in lending. So the department spends a ton of time and money trying to make sure that the inventory of housing that's available to low and moderate income individuals in this country is better, that there's a better inventory of housing. And often that work is spent in providing that ladder from homelessness, perhaps to public housing, to assisted housing, to rental, to home ownership, or from home ownership to rental, right? Because we're sort of evolving as a department and as a country. As a majority of our citizenry moves into urban areas, maybe renting, maybe home ownership, which has always been sort of the dream, maybe isn't everyone's dream anymore. Maybe for a millennial or for a boomer, like I'm gonna, like when I plan to retire one of these days, maybe I want to walk somewhere and have an apartment rather than a home. But to provide those ladders of opportunity. But when we talk about lending and in fair housing, it's a young couple. And it doesn't matter that they're here and they came here from India, or that they're disabled, or that the wife is carrying a baby, or is just off of maternity leave. They should be able to access and obtain either the rental property or purchase the home that they want, based on what they're able to afford and where they want to set up their household and their family. So lending is an area we spend a lot of time on. Maternity, disability, and an important area is, of course, protecting the rights of domestic violence victims. HUD is committed to ensuring that survivors of domestic violence don't have to live in fear of losing their homes in addition to being in fear for their lives on a daily basis. HUD is accomplishing this through using both the remedies available under the Fair Housing Act and also the Reauthorized Violence Against Women Act. So in 2013, VAWA was expanded its protection to survivors of sexual assault, in addition to the previously covered protections for survivors of domestic violence, dating, violence, and stalking. So it's just horrible to think that in some of the communities, there was a community in Norristown, Pennsylvania, that had some zoning laws that, basically it was a 3 strikes you're out. If the cops come to your house 3 times and it involves domestic anything, then the landlords had the right to put you out the door. So not only are these predominantly women having to live in an abusive situation, but then when law enforcement and the community, the people that we pay as a community to protect our rights show up, more often than not, they were being disadvantaged, and in addition to what they were suffering through, they in fact lost their housing, and their children, along with the mother, found themselves homeless. So, absolutely unacceptable. Having a safe, stable home is critical to helping survivors of domestic violence start a new chapter of their lives, free from violence, and our department is sincerely committed to that. We're obviously addressing national origin discrimination. Our country is evolving. There have always been immigrants have been a sort of a foundational piece in our country. I'm one myself. But with the influx of immigrants that are coming into our country now, it's an area that we're readdressing within our department and taking a really good look at. And I spoke about addressing discrimination against families with children, and that takes many forms. There's a place in Napa Valley where they put in some restrictions so that you could, they had a nice pool and everything, but children weren't allowed to swim in the pool during the day. So we fined them, and they changed their rules. And then, of course, disability discrimination. I know I'm preaching to the choir here, but when more than half the discrimination claims are against disabled people, just sort of makes you scratch your head. And then finally, a piece I want to talk about is Section 3 and economic opportunities. HUD is putting new energy behind its program that increases job opportunities for low-income individuals and public housing residents, and contracts for the businesses that hire them. Section 3 of the Housing and Urban Development Act of '68 requires that to the greatest extent feasible, employment and other economic opportunities generated by certain HUD financial assistance be directed to low and very low-income persons and to businesses that provide economic opportunities to these individuals. So we've made a lot of progress in that area and had some clarification in the last year. The national goal, as many of you know, was 30% of workers hired by Section 3 businesses to be low income. And happy to report the goal has been exceeded with grantees hiring about 50% of their hires as Section 3 residents. Okay, so that's good news. It's great work that's going on in our public housing authorities and other places. Affirmatively furthering fair housing. The Fair Housing Act made it clear that every American has the right to fair housing, regardless of their race, color, national origin, religion, sex, familial status, or disability. When the Fair Housing Act became law, it not only focused on addressing housing discrimination throughout the real estate market, but it also required that the federal government and its programs take proactive steps to affirmatively further fair housing in every town and neighborhood. This means taking action to reduce barriers to equal housing opportunity. In the past 3 years, the department has been very active in sort of at the macro or wholesale level at taking a look at sort of the underbelly of either zoning or not in my backyard activities that communities have, and that over time don't develop because individual people are bad or want to break the law, but just because of the nature of people and society. It's the same reason that after all these years, after Dr. King helped to change our country and gave his life for it, that there is still discrimination and segregation in parts of this country. So HUD is committed to equipping the people on the ground who implement our programs with clear guidance, partnering with them to achieve better compliance and reviewing all assessments. Our latest effort is in the area of disparate impact. So this systemic discrimination is being looked at, and as recently as this past January, the Supreme Court of the United States heard oral arguments in Texas Department of Housing and Community Affairs